Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to my weekly email newsletter, Friday Focus. Each Friday, I focus on one topic with one action arising. The link to sign up is in the show notes, or head over to amyrowlandson.com and sign up right now. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Duncan Bhaskaran Brown. Duncan, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to having a bit of a chat.
Oh, well, what do you think we're going to be chatting about, I wonder?
Probably the weather. I mean, we are British after all. So once we've got that difficult one out of the way, I don't know. Let's see what happens.
Well, it does begin with W, but it's not the weather. So what is it you're focusing on at the moment, Duncan?
Well, at the moment, I'm looking a lot at the impact that alcohol has on businesses. So I can bore you to death with all of the statistics, but the reality is that, there are a lot of people who are going into work and they are not performing as well as they could do because they are suffering from the effects of alcohol. And I don't even really mean a hangover. I just mean a heavy weekend and lost sleep, or just, a couple of glasses the night before and the effect that that has on your neurology and your biology and your sleep and all of that good stuff. And, working with businesses to see how we can help their staff become as productive and happy as possible.
And what do you think is the reluctance for people to take this information on board that you're sharing with them, if there is any?
Yeah. I mean, it's very understandable. It's not really a conversation that we have. Alcohol, it's so pervasive. It's so much a part of society that we don't think twice about it. Somebody will say, "Oh, really going to deserve that gin and tonic," and we just accept that. They say it's wine o'clock, and we don't even bat an eyelid. And part of what I try and do every day is just get people to think just a little bit more about alcohol and how it, seeps into everything they do and how it has an effect. So, yeah, I mean, it's something that is very, very common in society, but is not really thought about at all.
Now, there's two schools of thought that I see here, and I'm using this from my own personal findings that people can either make their own decision and keep quiet about it, or they make their own decision and then they are so empowered by what has happened that they are preaching it from the rooftops. Now, I struggle with not sharing the incredible results of sobriety. But my husband said if he had, to me, preached about how amazing he'd felt, then it would have pushed me further away from making that decision myself.
Yeah, that's a very, very interesting one. I mean, I obviously know a lot of people in the community, and in general, they fall into that camp of the kind of people who they are so in love with what's happened to them. The benefits that they're getting are so huge. The energy, the peace, the focus, the vitality, the joy with life. It's like, why would you not share that? You'd have to be a little bit selfish not to share that. But I get the point. I mean, I think the thing is, people need to go through a process before they're ready to get to sobriety. And along the way, they're going to have a lot of little nudges. And I always like to take credit when people stop drinking after having worked with me. But, I also know that along the way, there were a lot of little nudges. There were a lot of little things. And I think if you do it in the right way, then it can be just one of those little nudges, those little touch points that are just moving people slightly further down the line. That they're starting to see, to realize that there is another way. Think one of the real problems most people have is they feel trapped. They don't feel like they're able to escape. They don't feel like there is an alternative. And the more we stand up and show people that there is an alternative, that there is another way, and hey, it's a lot better, that I think it can only ever be powerful.
And it is difficult because I was at an event recently. It was a big gala dinner, and I was sat there, and I had an elderflower sparkling water. And it was lovely, and there was some cucumber in there, and then there's mint, and then I put it into my water glass, and somebody thought I'd brought my own accompaniments to jazz up my water, and I was like, no, no, no. I just was being creative and kept what I had from my previous drink. But there's just this sort of, I feel amazing. I know when my evening now stops, where I've got the most out of tonight. I'm now happy to go home. Before I didn't ever have that. I wanted the evening to go on forever. The irony being that I wouldn't remember that evening anyway, that after that point, and there would be lots of embarrassing moments that would then ensue. Whereas I think, as you said, people are not recognizing that there is an alternative, and because it is so accepted from a society norm to deserve that drink. You know, when has it become a case of if you've had a busy day, then you deserve this reward of this poison.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had a really stressful day, so I need some poison that's going to make me feel terrible tomorrow so that I can have another really stressful day and justify having a drink after that. Yeah.
I don't know, it sounds so simple but I mean, best part of 35 years, I'd been living this life of perpetual cycle.
Yeah. I mean, it is a treadmill, and it makes you feel bad and makes you believe that having a drink will make you feel better. And in reality, that first drink probably does make you feel a little bit better. But what you've got to see is you've got to accept that it's a kind of form of well-being mortgaging. You feel slightly better in that moment, but you feel 2.5 times worse the next day when you wake up, just in the same way that you borrow 100 grand off the bank and you pay back £250,000. And it works if you're buying property, because, as I'm sure you're aware, property only ever goes one way. So by the time you've paid it all back, you've made your money. But feeling good doesn't work quite the same way. You're just mortgaging your future well-being.
I love that expression. Tell me more.
So, I mean, I can go into all of the boring biology and the neurology of it, but in essence, there is part of you that just wants to have a drink. And when you give in and you have that drink, you feel better. That is not the drink taking you from 100% and making you 125%. That's the drink taking you from way down somewhere and making you feel something like normal again. But you never get back to 100% because the long-term effects of it, it changes the way your brain processes all of these wonderful, happy brain chemicals, and thus it reduces the amount of joy you feel. It increases the amount of anxiety you feel. It gets in the way of things like learning and development. It ruins your sleep. It just, in general, is a great recipe for making yourself feel less good. And I am not even talking about, bottle of wine a night territory. I am talking about glass of wine a night territory. Anything more than 1 or 2 units 4 times a week, you are definitely in the territory of causing yourself serious issues. You won't notice it, of course, because you start to mistake that malaise, that lethargy, that ill health, that general feeling rubbish. You start to mistake that for real life, but that is not what life is.
And if before 3-4 months ago, I would have had this conversation with you. In fact, I have had this conversation with you. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not me, Duncan. Don't stop me from enjoying my alcohol. Don't stop me from enjoying my chocolate. And it is that the difference of knowing actually the state of this fog that you put yourself in over a period of years, decades, you don't actually know what a normal day is like. And that one glass or two is enough to make that shift.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I don't want to take away anybody's uh, joyful use of alcohol. You know, if you want to enjoy alcohol, go and enjoy alcohol. All I do just want you to do is think about it. You know, ask yourself, are you genuinely doing that because it is a genuinely enjoyable thing that is really enhancing your life? Or are you doing it because you have simply just received these messages the whole of your life from TV, from film, from streaming services, from sports people, from rock stars, from politicians, from your parents, and from your mates? Is that the reason why you're drinking? Or do you really enjoy it?
And this parallel of receiving information and then acting upon it is seen across all different areas of your life. And there are constant messaging, subliminal messaging that we take on board without even realizing it. What was a shift for you?
So for me, I think it all started when I was actually in my early 20s was the first time I read Alan Carr's Easy Way to Stop Smoking. And that kind of like flicked a bit of a switch in my head about the kind of things that we put into our body. To be fair, it didn't entirely work out with the stopping smoking thing. And I did stop for a bit, started again, and continued to increase my drinking and eating junk food and all of that kind of stuff. But it had planted that idea into my head, and I think I am kind of lucky that I am naturally a little bit iconoclastic. I am a little bit like the kind of person who refuses to believe what they're told. I'm like, right, okay, well, I really, is it actually like that, or is that just something you're saying? So I think I've always had that kind of anti-establishment. I'm not really prepared to believe you. So when it got to the point where alcohol had become so bad in my life that I really did need to get rid of it, I kind of had a pretty good idea that everything that I had heard about it was complete junk. And, I was kind of already opening up to those ideas.
And then what?
And then I stopped magically, and my life became Instagram perfect, and all my friends got sexier. No, so as I said, I first got involved with Alan Carr. That's the world famous addiction expert, by the way, not the comedian. In my early 20s. So when I wanted to stop smoking, uh, in my early 30s, I decided that I would reread this book, and I actually made it stick that time. So when kind of things moved along a little bit, and the next thing had to come out of the lifestyle, and that was alcohol, that naturally sent me back to Alan, and I just kind of like basically reread the Easy Way to Stop Smoking, realized I'd misremembered half of it, and applied that to alcohol, and yeah, then I stopped drinking. And then the bit that nobody ever really talks about was, I had a lot of struggles, and it was quite hard for probably about 18 months. That's partly because stopping drinking coincided with having a daughter and, love her and everything. But that's quite hard in and of itself. My wife got quite ill after she'd given birth as well. And to a point where I'd started eating junk food the way I used to drink. Once I'd got that sorted out, and once I'd kind of stabilized, then my life got Instagram perfect and all my friends got better looking. Um, and I think that's such an important thing to kind of get across to people that, yes, when you stop drinking, you instantly feel better. But if you have been drinking because you have been trying to ignore some problems in your life, either emotional or procedural or logistical or whatever, then they are going to come back. They are going to still be there when you've stopped drinking. And now you are going to have to face them, which is both annoying, but actually quite good, because you are then in a position where you are able to look them straight in the eye. And what you find is half of them weren't half as bad as you thought they were going to be, and the other ones you just work your way through in due course. But unfortunately, that's something that not a lot of people talk about, sobriety.
Yeah, and it's so true. I mean, it's the numbing that you get from disappearing into a world where you can slow down the thoughts or forget the problems, and at the other end of the bottle, they're still there and they will come back, and
Yeah,
so it
I
doesn't
mean,
change the facts.
for me, they didn't even go away for the entire evening. You know, first glass, they'd disappear, but towards the end of the first bottle, and they'd start bubbling up again, and they just seemed larger. I sort of, to rip off an analogy from Plato, I think it's like your problems. There's a torch behind them, and it's beaming the shadow onto the wall, and it's making them look very, very big. And certainly, that kind of like 1.5 bottles of wine kind of range in the evening, then I would be quite upset and quite worried about my problems because they would appear massive. As soon as I stopped drinking and as soon as I turned the torch off, I realized that, that giant monster on the wall is actually just a mouse at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay. So moving from the different addictions as you just shared, so the smoking to the alcohol to the junk food, what's the purpose piece in all of this work?
So, what I would dearly love to do is to, well, two things really. One, we've sort of already talked about, there is a lot of problems in society. And I think we really do need to change the conversation in society. We need to say to somebody, let's go out for a drink, and them to sort of think that we mean maybe that nice kind of elderflower and sparkling water with a bit of cucumber in it, rather than, some yeah, ropey old ethanol. So I think we need to do that piece. We need to change society, and it is happening. It is coming. In 20 years' time, people will look at alcohol the same way they look at smoking. But the problem is, there are people out there who don't have 20 years to wait. In fact, I worked with somebody earlier this year who probably didn't have 20 days to wait. If she'd continued drinking the way she was drinking, she would have been dead in 3 weeks. So we also need to work with people, to help them now because they need help now. Even more than that, I think it's really important to work as a community, to work with all of the people who choose not to drink alcohol and help them to find a way through life because, they don't want to wait 20 years to go out. They need to be able to go out this evening. They need to go and enjoy their lives. So there are a lot of kind of techniques and strategies that I want to share with people to help them do that as well.
And you mentioned at the beginning the impact that alcohol has on businesses and the reality that people aren't performing and that companies are suffering from the effects of alcohol. What about personal life too?
Oh yeah, I mean, I talk a lot about energy and focus and productivity and stuff like that, but I mean, I think the real benefit that I got from stopping drinking was that it really helped me to improve my relationships, to understand, you know, what my wife was asking for when she was asking for help. Because, I am a man. So I assume if you ask for help, you want some shelves putting up. When actually what she meant, of course, was that she wanted somebody to listen to her, to understand, to be compassionate, and to just give her a hug. And that, I think, that kind of like blossoming of emotional intelligence. It's certainly nothing really to do with me. It's what happens to a lot of men when they go on this kind of sober journey. They get to grips with their emotions and they deepen their relationship. So, in terms of your personal life, I don't think I've ever met an area of your personal life that it won't improve.
And you mentioned there specifically the emotional intelligence for men. Do you feel that there's a different experience here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that as men, we kind of take it for granted that when something is talked about, we're just talking about men doing it. But that is not necessarily true in the sobriety community. While men are far more likely, 2 to 3 times more likely to have a drinking problem, they are less likely to seek help, and they are less likely to talk about it once they have. And if you look at the top 15 books on Amazon about stopping drinking, the majority of them were written by women. The ones that are written by men were generally written by Alan Carr, who has been dead for 17 years. So it doesn't say much about the kind of effort that men are putting into to try and help each other to get through these problems. And there are some people doing great work, some women doing amazing work. I love Claire Pooley. I think her stuff's amazing. But I imagine that talking about drinking Chardonnay after the school run is not exactly going to resonate with a lot of men. So as men, I think we have a responsibility to step up, to help each other, to actually create a movement to help men to stop drinking. And the knock-on effect of that is, yes, we will increase our emotional intelligence. We will be better husbands. We will be better fathers. We'll be better human beings.
So you've mentioned that there are a lot of books out there, and I have been diving into this new world for me of quit lit, and it's fascinating. It is really interesting to hear other people's journeys, to follow different thoughts and experiences that people have had, and the realities that they've faced, and the understanding that they've come to of how a sobriety or a life of sobriety is a more informed, better version of themselves. Have there been some books that have helped you, or what's really helped you with your journey?
So yeah, I do love a book. I have read many of them. I just finished something called Addicted in Film, which is the best book I've read in a while about it. It, it's about how recovery is portrayed in Hollywood. And I think it's very interesting if you've already recovered. If you haven't, if you just want a general introduction to alcohol and the kind of effects that it has on you in a very, very non-judgmental way, I always recommend Drink by Professor David Nutt. He used to be the government's chief drug czar, and he's incredibly well respected scientist. And his book is very, very clear and very even-handed, and it's not moralistic, it's not preachy, it does not tell you what to do, it simply gives you the information, the kind of information that usually makes you think, oh, actually, why am I doing this? But he doesn't tell you what to think, so that is always a good starting point.
And that's the thing. That comes back to the conversation I was saying earlier of the two sort of schools of campus. You just get on with your own thing and you keep quiet, or that you can become quite preachy because of just how impactful it's been. And when you've got older children, as I have, it's hard now for me not to say anything. But my husband we've had this conversation about actually just do as he has done for the last 2.5 years, and that can be as powerful as well.
Yeah, I mean, the best piece of parenting advice that I've ever had, the only piece of parenting advice that ever made any sense, is your children will ignore everything you say and copy everything you do, which is why I do get a little bit annoyed when people go, oh yeah, well, drop them off at the party and stay and have a glass of champagne with us. And it's like, oh, well, fantastic. What you have done is you've hijacked your kid's party. You've turned it into an event for you. And it's not for you, it's for them. And what you're really teaching them is that celebration is impossible without alcohol. And that is one of the worst lessons that society shoves into people's heads.
And it is that, isn't it? Probably when we were talking earlier about the not having an alternative, and that to have a celebration or to have an event that is worthy of celebration, alcohol needs to come to the party.
Yeah, look, I mean, the ultimate irony of that one is I have been to several funerals of people who have died as a direct result of drinking alcohol. And what did we do at the wake? We got drunk. And it's just, oh, irony of ironies. And, you kind of mentioned that there's always differences of opinions, and some people are very dogmatic about how alcohol-free beer is the work of the devil, and for some people it's made a huge difference and it's allowed them to be sober. So, I don't care what you do so long as it makes you happy and so long as, it doesn't harm other people whilst you're doing it. And I am quite into Royal Flush is the nice kind of alcohol free champagne. It's sparkling Darjeeling, if I remember correctly. It's like, but honestly, like last Christmas, my mum poured some for me in exactly the same glass as everybody else was drinking champagne. And I put it down and did something else and then picked it up again and went, oh my God, I've picked up the wrong one. This is actually champagne. On closer inspection, it proved not to be it. So, there are alternatives out there. And I just think that's what I would love to see. I would love to walk into events and be handed an alcohol free drink. And if you want alcohol, of course it's available. You just have to go to the bar. But those people with the trays walking around, handing out the drinks, that should always be alcohol free.
Yeah, and that was what happened to me at the Scala dinner, and I was so excited to have a more sophisticated option available, which was great. And for that to be the norm would be more than what I dreamed for, really.
Yeah. And if you're running the event, like, wise up, mate. Sparkling water with a bit of cucumber in it and some elderflower, hell of a lot cheaper than Cristal, isn't it?
Yeah. So you spoke about being in love with what's happening to you and what has been happening to you and the joy of life that it's brought. Tell me more about the purpose of your work.
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, it is. I just want to share that joy. I want to give that to people, whether that's through sort of like one-to-one work where we're really kind of getting right down into the weeds of what they believe. And, I mean, you've done enough coaching to know how exciting that is to watch people kind of remove the junk that's been sitting in their head and holding them back for years and years and years. Like I love doing that, and I love seeing people as they progress and develop, and they say back to me the same sort of thing. They're like, Duncan, I can't believe it, I feel amazing, why didn't I do this years ago? So that fills me full of joy and excitement. But as I say, I think we need to work on society in a much broader level, and we just need to keep hacking away at it and pointing out that there is a genuine business case for helping your employees to get to grips with their drinking. They will be happier, they will be more productive. But more than that, I genuinely think someone fairly soon in America is going to sue their employer for exposing them to a poisonous and dangerous chemical as a part of their job and not adequately providing, the appropriate risk assessments and safety and things like that. And, at the end of the day, alcohol is a toxic, harmful, poisonous chemical that if it wasn't alcohol would have to be kept in the metal cases with all of the hazard warning diamonds. You'd need the risk assessment, you'd need all of that stuff if it wasn't just this one thing that we kind of ignore. And we allow our employees to pour it down their throats when they're taking the clients out for dinner, when they're at sales conferences, when they're at the kickoffs, when they're at away days, when they're socializing. And people haven't thought this through. And, until you do, you are at risk of it coming back to bite you spectacularly.
And you mentioned earlier that you think that in the next 20 years that we will be looking back in the same way that we have with smoking, and how that was I would say quite a fast period of time of going from everybody smoking in the 60s, 70s to then the 80s, 90s realization for it to be banned in the sort of the early 2000s in public places. And fantastic, we're 23, 24 years later from that particular event. Alcohol was around way before cigarettes. It's the shift is not as fast at all.
No, but if you think about it, lung cancer was unquestionably linked to cigarettes in the early 50s. cancer and alcohol were unquestionably linked together in the 80s. So it's about 30 years behind. So it is coming. And there is nothing that is going to get in the way of it. And I think part of it is that kind of understanding piece that a lot of people think we've been drinking alcohol for a long time. That's not actually that true. You know, everybody drinking alcohol is a relatively modern kind of idea. People drinking beers that are over 6%, it's a very modern idea. Yeah, you can, because the government has been keeping records on these things called tax, you know, you can actually look back at the customs and excise and you can see how the strength of beer has increased year on year for the last 150 years. You know, people in the Victorian era were drinking beer that was about 2%, which is almost effectively not alcoholic. It's certainly not Stella Artois. You know, so it has changed. And even in your drinking career, you know, the strength of wine will have gone up. It used to be around 10%. It's now knocking on for 14%.
And that's really interesting, isn't it? The sort of the volume has the size measures that you get have decreased but the glasses have got bigger, and so the strength has got bigger, and it is that bigger and more, yeah, just the whole consumer led society, isn't it?
They call it premiumization in the alcohol industry, and it's a way of extracting more money from you, you know, because at the end of the day, that's what alcohol companies are there for. They are there to get your money out of your pocket. And like, I know you have heard this, and I'm sure your listeners have probably heard this. It is much easier to sell to an existing customer than it is to recruit a new customer. And that is great if you are selling flip flops or cars or magazines. However, if you're selling an addictive, dangerous, poisonous chemical, then that is not a great strategy. And actually, the alcohol industry makes most of its money from people who are drinking at dangerous levels. It basically, its profit comes from suffering, misery, and the ruination of life.
So where does a purpose piece fit in here for those businesses and for the the future?
Well, I think that this should be fitting into everybody's well-being program. You know, I think it is great that most businesses have now cottoned on to the fact that there is a economic and, of course, moral case for making sure that your staff are well and are happy and are productive. But nobody in the well-being industry is actually talking about alcohol. It's one of those things that everybody ignores, and it's great. I love yoga. I think yoga is fantastic. I love meditation. I think meditation is fantastic. But it ain't worth a damn if you're drinking a bottle of wine every night. And it's like that's the kind of the piece that I think businesses have got to get their head around. They already know what they want to do. They just need a bit more information to help them really, you know, make the most of the great work that they're already doing around health and well-being.
And it's really interesting. I was listening to a podcast, and the discussion was that the particular guest on this show was talking about how she'd been speaking to sleep doctors, and that alcohol never came up in the conversation pre-diagnosis for their issues of sleep, which seems to be insane.
Yeah, I mean, I know somebody who was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome, and then they moved to a different country. So they obviously got into a different kind of medical system, and realized they were running out of the medication that they had, and they were starting to get a little bit worried about it. But then something else kind of like prompted them to stop drinking, and they stopped drinking for a few weeks and realized they didn't need the chronic fatigue medication anymore. Their symptoms disappeared. You know, the medical professional, they should know better. You know, if you are a sleep doctor, you should know better. The first thing, before you get blackout blinds, I mean, blackout blinds are a great idea. But before you get blackout blinds, stop drinking. It's going to make more of a difference.
Oh, the blackout reference there. I'm not going to go down that. But it It really is a conversation that is just worth pursuing in terms of understanding. And you were talking earlier about mindful drinking, even if you're not stopping, just be more mindful about your drinking. And that's what we're looking to encourage people to do, is just to look at what they're doing, notice whether they may feel better, not.
Yeah, yeah. I bumped into a friend the other day, and he was outside at an event, and it was freezing. I mean, it was properly cold. And he's kind of like holding this pint, with the sleeve of his jumper because his hand is so cold. And I'm like, you are not enjoying that. That is not an enjoyable drink. And I think that's one of the things. If you're going to drink, I mean, at least make them count. At least drink the ones that you enjoy.
Well, on that note, tell me the vision that you have for the future.
So yeah, I'd like to walk into a restaurant or a bar, and it would just be like 50% of the drinks are non-alcoholic. And I've got the choice. There are the mocktails. It's not three an afterthought at the end of the menu. It's the same size as the cocktail menu. That the beers on the bar are, a mixture of alcohol free and the ones with alcohol, and you can order them and nobody will really know and nobody will really judge you. And if I ask for a glass of sparkling water, it gets delivered in a really fancy glass with a little bit of cucumber and some strawberry in it and a nice. So it looks just like my wife's gin and tonic, but so long as they don't charge me £8 for it, then I'm happy. But I think that's the world I want to live in, the one where alcohol can still exist if people want to drink it sensibly, so it's not damaging their health and it's not damaging their relationships. That's great, but there's just as much room for people to come out and enjoy themselves, and have something tasty. Like, I've got nothing against Coke. Coca-Cola's great if your drains are blocked and you need them cleaned. Coca-Cola is a fantastic substance for that, but we're just like a little bit more alcohol-free choice. So it's normalized.
And what I'm hearing is, yes, alcohol is the focus of the conversation, but as a metaphor for life, you're talking about equity and equality here as well.
Yes. And the amusing thing is that there are people out there who are, or companies that are actually rethinking this, but far more from an equality and diversity point of view, because less young people are drinking, and obviously, there are some Hindus and most Muslims who don't drink. So if you want to reach the top talent, then don't make don't have a beer fridge. It's going to send totally the wrong impression to potential talent. So you would be missing out. So yes, absolutely, it's about the equality, and I want everybody to be comfortable, and I want us all to go out and have a good time and concentrate on something interesting. Concentrate on our why, on our purpose, like actually get down to discussing changing the world rather than, is that sparkling water you're drinking, Duncan?
Yeah, absolutely. So better choices, better conversations creates a better world. Yeah, love it.
Absolutely.
Duncan, how could people get in contact with you, please?
So I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. And if you wanted to like me or connect with me or follow me or whatever the appropriate verb is, do that. Send me a message, and I will share with you a link where you can get a copy of my book, Get Over Indulgence. You can have that on Kindle, PDF, or audio. That's quite easy. So just connect with me, and I'll send you that link, or we could just have a chat. I quite like chatting. I don't know whether that comes across or not.
Well, thank you so much. I'll make sure all those links go into the show notes. And yes, it's been great chatting with you. And I do hope that your vision for the next few years comes true. And it will be a case of individually we will all make a difference if we are working towards that vision as well. And I know it's something that, as you said earlier, and as my husband has been saying, it's very much a case of just doing, and then people will copy what you're doing because it'll become more acceptable and more the norm to do what it is that we're doing. So yeah, great.
Yeah, it's coming. Don't you worry. We're at the foamy, with a foamy bit of a breaking wave.
Amazing. So do you have some final words, please, Duncan?
Yeah, the thing that I'd love everybody to really, really appreciate is that they are enough. You know, every one of your listeners, they are whole, they are complete, they are enough. They never needed alcohol, cigarettes, junk food. You don't need any of that. You have everything inside you that you need to live a beautiful and happy life.
How has this conversation had an impact on you? What value have you received from tuning in? What are your reflections with actions? Please take a moment to leave me an Apple Podcast or Spotify review sharing how Focus on Why has made a difference to you today. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. To keep it going, simply connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, or join the Focus on Why Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.